Hello, hello. Welcome to the 1912 Exiles podcast Christmas special. The original, the biggest, the best Newport County podcast made by the fans and for the fans, and brought to you by Terrace Cymru and in association with the Riverside Sports Bar. I'm Jamie, and I'll be attempting to control this rebel this evening. With me, I've got the good doctor, Dr. Ed Bridges. How are we?
Nadolig llawn i chi gyd. Yeah, I'm all right. Merry Christmas, one and all. Cyfarchion y tymor. Season's greetings. How are we all? Are we all festive?
I think we're all festive. Also with us, we've got the OG, Mr. Rhys Warren. Rhys, how are we?
Yeah, Merry Christmas all. Good, thank you.
Merry Christmas to you. And also from the Northern Beat, it's Mr. Ian Street. Ian is dressed in the new Newport County 4th kit, which, as everybody knows, Ian is a huge fan of additional kits. How are we, Ian?
We are good. We're good. Yeah. Happy Christmas, everybody. I've got a nice little cheeky little red wine here. Not the one that Nelson recommended, I'm afraid. I couldn't quite stretch to £600 a bottle, but you've not been good enough for this year. Not been good, but it's still a nice drop.
We are recording our annual Christmas special, where we love to sort of take a step away from current proceedings because it's sometimes not always that festive, talking about Newport's travails in League Two. So we like to have a little daydream. We like to sort of go off on a few tangents, and you'll forgive us if we do so again this year. And for this year's special, we decided to talk a little bit about our dream match day experience. You know, we're talking about things like the ground itself, talking about things like the food, the drinks, the atmosphere, and of course, the floodlights is Floodlight Watch, obviously. So we want to know what really makes a ground and a match day really so beloved. And we want to sort of touch on our experiences of following Newport back in the day when we first started following them and up to now, and kind of cherry picking our sort of favourite moments, and really about what makes going to football special. Because ultimately, we don't all do it for the 0-0 draws, although there have been plenty of those recently. Yeah, we do it because we love going. You probably won't be hearing about things like Wembley arches or cantilevered roofs. You know, this is a League Two football podcast, and it's full of folk who cherish the quirky, more relatable characteristics of going to watch football. I think we could probably start by talking about maybe what got us going in the first place. You know, our sort of early memories of going to watch football going to watch Newport County as well. Things that might stick in the mind for us and what sort of like attracted us. Who would like to kick us off this evening?
I'll jump in, seeing as I'm the oldest, so I can go back the furthest, I guess. So we'll start off. Yeah, so I had the first ever football game I went to, like live, was a Newport game. So, like any kid, I like my football. And I didn't grow up in a football supporting household. So although I played in a park and, stuff with your mates and whatever, and liked football teams, you like many kids when you're starting, you're probably following bigger clubs, so they're the ones who have the publicity. Probably didn't even realise there was a club in the town I grew up in. Do you know what I mean? Because, my dad wasn't a football supporter. So it was when I was 12, 13, something like that, Newport had got promoted to the old third division as Division 1, but old third division. They'd won the Welsh Cup the year before, got promoted. So that, I was a glory hunter then, I guess. You know what I mean? So there was a bit of publicity about this, and I was like, suddenly, oh, there's a club here where I live. And I had a mate who used to go over. So, I went just one day with him, and I can really remember it really well. It was October 1980, I believe. It was my first game. And I can remember it was against Huddersfield Town. And bizarrely, I can remember the score. We won 3-2, so that was a good start. And really weirdly, I've always been able to remember the attendance, 6,403. It's a very sort of surreal experience, early football, in terms of when you first go, when you're a bit younger, you're in a that in those days, mostly male environment, everyone's swearing, you sort of hearing things that you wouldn't necessarily hear in the house necessarily, everyone smoking, of course, back then. But I think it was colours, wasn't it? Colours and sounds and smells and, we'll probably get on to like walks to the ground and what you could see and, that whole thing, I was, really captivated by it. And it was a sort of, I guess, in a way, it was a step towards, adolescence and a step towards adulthood, really, which started, going over the summer. And that after that first game, I was hooked. And about 4 games later, I was watching us play Carl's Jena. I thought, well, this is great, isn't it?
I know what you mean, Ian. I feel like the sort of early formative years of going to a game, it's like this is stuff that you, like you say, you don't really hear at home, and it's a little bit like hits all of the senses, doesn't it? Like you said, the sights, the smells, and that, and it's just like it's this because there's so much going on. There's so much to take in. My first sort of football match, I remember distinctly, and I started going watch football in the 90s because I'm a little bit younger here. Obviously, Newport County weren't on my radar in the 90s, I have to admit. So I was at Villa Park. That was my first ever game. They lost to Liverpool 4-2. Yeah, that was it. Robbie Fowler got a hat trick. Stan Collymore got sent off. But what I remember was just getting to the ground early and just sort of seeing everything just sort of happen around me. I remember seeing, standing outside the gates and just waiting for all the Villa players to come in, and they all came in individually as well. They drove to Villa Park and then parked up. Not like these days where like home teams get on a team bus and then like parade themselves into the ground. Just felt a little bit more normal. Yeah, I remember going to watch my dad play for Chepstow Town. It felt exactly the same. The team would just drive and arrive a couple of hours before kickoff and it'd just be normal. But this was a Premier League game, so I was always quite fascinated by watching a team warm up. I don't know why, but I just 45 minutes before kickoff is an age for like a 7-year-old. It feels so long, doesn't it? But yeah, that was sort of the thing for me, just sort of taking everything in, taking the crowd sort of coming in. I just loved it. Then I started going to some of the sort of smaller teams around us. I remember going to Edgar Street for a game, watching Hereford play. I remember going, I think it's Bristol Rovers as well. And then of course Newport County, and we're having a little later in our Conference South days, I'd have to say around, I think I've mentioned it before, around 2005 or something, taking into account all of those people buzzing around, milling around, they're all busy, they've got jobs to do, might be a media person, might be the groundsman or whatever, and just sort of understand that there are so many people involved in putting on a match, even at Conference South level. And that's what really sort of grabbed me and fascinated me. This is a whole like ecosystem.
That's a great first game, though. Villa Park, if we're going to talk about stadiums, that's one of Britain's great grounds, I would say.
Yeah, I love it. Proper old school. We'll get to what makes a great ground. Any early memories for either of you two, Rhys or Ed?
Yeah, so I started going over in the mid-90s, kind of similar to you. I think I started off going over Spitty. The first game I remember is I was a ball boy when I was Cullion under 8s or under 9s, something like that. And they introduced us as the netball team over the PO, which is funny because it's obviously like 20 lads stood around the side of the pitch and they've gone, yeah, that looks like a netball team.
So it must have been your skirt that distracted them.
Yeah, clearly. And I just remember having the best time running up and down the running track. I wasn't really interested in the game. I've just never been on a running track before. This is great. That's where I started going over, but I started going over regularly when I finished uni and moved back home. So then me and my dad started going over. And that coincided nicely with our uptick in the Blue Square South when we got promoted in 2010.
And what a season that was.
I pretty much, as my dad's frequently reminded me, I've got to see the glory years of Newport County really, and retaining the Football League and going to Wembley in the FA Trophy, and then promotion, and then 2 failures at promotion, but still going to Wembley. But again, we did a lot of visits, similar to you, a lot of visits to Villa Park, used to be our end of season trip. And I think we went to watch Coventry once, and that one stands out in memory because Tim Flowers, who I share a birthday with, got sent off while he wasn't on the pitch. He was a substitute. He ran on the pitch to get involved in a fight with someone and got sent off before he'd even come onto the pitch.
I never had Tim Flowers down as aggro kind of player. He always seemed quite timid and like clearly something riled in that day.
But I'm pretty sure my first ever game, I was just trying to find it online, that I went to is my dad took me to Wales A against South Africa A at the Cardiff Arms Park. And I remember it just being great, being able to just shout stuff. You can just shout stuff at the pitch and no one really cares what you're saying.
I mean, that has always been it was one of the things I remember as a kid, and it's one of the things I still like now as an adult. I definitely remember as a kid going to football and understanding that men in particular who have been at work all week, you can't swear at your boss, but you can swear at a linesman, and that sort of is the same thing. And that cathartic thing of being able to get your anxiety out by shouting at some poor official is, sometimes the best proxy. And I still like that now, and I sort of I tell my kids as well, look, you can't call your teacher an arsehole, you can't call your boss an arsehole, but you can let stuff out of the football, and it is that kind of safety valve. It is cathartic. And I think that is still one of the reasons why I quite like to go, because, I do feel as though I've got stuff out of my system by 5 o'clock on a Saturday.
That's also one of the things that I really love is I love listening to like someone getting dog's abuse from the stand. I'm not often involved in it because a lot of it comes from the shed, kind of where you're sat, Ed, and I'm on the opposite side. But I love when the crowd just gets after like one player or
Yeah. One player in particular.
kind of the opposition manager or the liner.
And when it's funny as well, because, shouting a stream of expletives, it's not big and it's not clever. We all do it occasionally. But, when people are being creative and funny with it, there's no better place to be. And I think particularly when it's like an away end on a Tuesday night and it's sleeting down with rain and you've all decided, right, let's just really get on board with having a go at their left back, and that's just what you do for 45 minutes, and everyone's on the same page, and it's funny and it's creative. Like that's one of my perfect football scenarios.
I actually remember, I think it was I might have been not the first game I went to, but it was definitely an early game at Villa Park. And I don't know if you remember the referee, Uriah Rennie, he was reffing that day. And it was one of the, again, it was like abuse, but it was funny. And it was just a guy who just went, he's the only Rennie who gives you indigestion. And I thought, fair play, fair play.
The humour of football is often really, I think for people who don't go and don't know it, I think that it's really underrated. There's an awful lot of humour at football and in football crowds. And I'm like you, Ed, I'm not interested in the abuse, but the funny things and some of the funny chants are genuinely witty and hilarious.
Okay, I mean we're talking about some of the sort of foibles and the quirkiness and the idiosyncrasies of going and watch games. Perhaps, yeah, maybe we sort of take a step back and talk about the whole experience here from the start. Pre-match rituals. People go to Rodney Parade, every other week now. Presumably going to the Riverside Tavern. I should hope so. If they don't, they should be doing. But yeah, pre-match stuff. I mean, does anyone have any sort of particular fond either memories or things that they find that they love do as part of their pre-match ritual, aside from waiting for trains in? Maybe that is a pre-match ritual for you, Ian. I don't know.
That's definitely a pre-match ritual. When's the optimum time to buy a train ticket? And what you don't do is do what I've done for the 2nd of January game. Found an unbelievably, there's never cheap tickets from Leeds to Newport. Found one, bought my return ticket, brilliant. I will have to leave Newport before the game kicks off because I thought it was a 3 o'clock kickoff. And it's 7:45 or 8 o'clock. Don't do that, kids. So yes, I spend a lot of time pre my ritual, looking at trains. But what I will say, one of the rituals for me was, it's not a ritual as such, but Old Somerton. So I used to get dropped off before I could drive or whatever. If I caught the bus from the Killian up over, which there was one bus you could do that, up over St Julian's, get off at the top and walk down through Beechwood Park, I think it is. Cross Trepstow Road at the bottom, and as you walk down Somerton Road, you had to go over the railway bridge. So if it was an evening game, you could see the floodlights in the difference. But it was that railway bridge was incredibly iconic for me because you got to the point where you could judge the crowd to within about 100, judging by how many people were walking over the bridge at the set time, because you'd always sort of be going at the same time. And it was incredible. Sometimes if you had a bigger game, it'd be spilling over and taking the whole road, when we were a bit rubbish, it'd just be single file along the pavement, but that railway bridge over the railway towards Somerton Park, for me, is one of my most vivid memories. It's not even in the ground or anything, but that is a really vivid memory. And now my pre-match rituals change because I don't live in Newport, so often it's doing a little bit of research about where there's a nice brewery, or somewhere I can get some good cheese, or my needs and wants have changed over the years. Let's put it that way.
I love arriving at Newport train station on a match day, sort of like, because I'll always make sure I've got time to something pre-match when I'm down. So I love arriving at, say, like midday, something for 3 o'clock kickoff, and then you've got like that. I don't know. It's a 15-minute walk between there and the ground, but you've got 3 hours to kill, so you can just like have a mosey, have a little wander. But yeah, that I think probably the equivalent for you for that Summerson walk now is that walk across the footbridge. And I just love that. I love that. That feels like that proper little journey, that little approach to the ground. And again, you see the floodlights on a night match. I just love seeing that again, the crowds of people just sort of flowing across that bridge. It's yeah,
And,
it's sort
and
of like
because it kind of, it's a pinch point and everyone comes together a bit like the railway bridge that Ian's talking about. I like the fact that, I mean, firstly, if it's a big crowd, you can feel the bridge bouncing as you're walking over from all the kind of people stampeding across it. So again, it's quite a good indication of, oh, is it, if we got a big crowd today, is the bridge bouncing? But also like overhearing the little snippets of conversation and predictions from people and accents of away fans and stuff, and all of that. You can start to feel yourself getting into the match day mood on that first game of the season thing of going, oh yeah, I remember this now. It's sort of it's all coming back to you. Yeah, I definitely feel like that little trip over the footbridge is a moment.
The other thing as well, I mean, we can talk about some of the other grounds in the country that we may frequent. It's what I call the stadium reveal. You turn a corner and then the stadium, the ground just reveals itself to you. And there are some sort of phenomenal grounds, particularly the old school ones. I'm talking about the ones which are sort of like sat in the middle of a load of residential streets, and you're like, I'm not even sure are we going the right way? I'm not even sure there's a ground here. And then you turn a corner, and then you just see the one sort of long stand which sort of like lines up against the rest of the houses. I mean, one of my personal favorites, because I used to live around the corner from there, is actually Fulham's ground. I don't know if anyone's been to Craven Cottage, but everyone can picture it. It's on the the banks of the Thames. Very different now to what it was. Well, even 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago, with the new stand on the Riverside. But because that other stand is next to the cottage itself in the corner is listed, they can't really do much about it. And it's got this stunning brickwork all along the side. It doesn't sort of rise above the rows and rows of houses. So you can just turn a corner onto that street, and there it is, and it looks exactly the same that it did probably 100 years ago. Is one of my probably favorite sort of walks to a ground, actually, I would say.
I'll tell you another good ground reveal that I only went to a couple of years ago is Barnsley. Oakwell it's only a kind of 10-minute walk from the town centre, but you go up a little bit of a hill. You're going into a like residential area. It's all back to back red brick terrace houses, and then you crest the hill and you go down, and suddenly the ground kind of reveals itself in this nest of little houses down in the kind of valley of this hill. And Oakwell, again, it's a proper kind of old traditional ground, and that little moment of cresting the hill and going, it's there, and you just get this nice little reveal of it that was a quite an impressive one.
A lot of the old school northern grounds like fall into that. You think of the Lowry paint in the match. That idea of the grounds used to be, and many of them still are, in sort of old school industrial heartlands where they're surrounded by terraced houses and they're sort of wedged in. I mean, even in our division, Grimsby's a good example of that. But lots of the northern grounds are very similar to that. Just a fun thing about, you were talking about the hill at Barnsley, Ed. I think it was, is it Will Alsop, like an architect? He came up with a master plan for northern towns. And his master plan for Barnsley was he thought that was like an Italian hill village. He wanted to reimagine Barnsley as like a Tuscan hill village. And anyone who's been to Barnsley would go, it's not a Tuscan hill village.
Barnsleyissimo or something. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, but loads of the northern grounds I think are very similar to that. So there's no one that really springs to mind. But I'm going to throw a forum one in for that, and about how you can redo grounds well. I'd say both Spurs's and Arsenal's ground. They've stayed in their traditional area. They haven't moved far away. And I think that's quite bold, because obviously a lot of people build them on the outskirts of towns now, which is the worst thing ever. So any reveal, like you were saying, it needs to be close to like Newport, close to the city centre. And I'm going to just quickly take us to Bilbao, because their grounds, I've not been inside it because I've never managed to get a ticket, but when they've rebuilt that, they've kept it pretty much where the old ground was, but they've lined it up so that it's looking down like one of the main sort of thoroughfares into the middle of Bilbao, and they put like a big screen on the outside of it. So all of the way down from the city centre, it's just got Pinchos bars all the way down. You can see it, and then it's at the end of this road. So and it's a grid-like system, so you could be walking on other roads and you don't see it, and then you hit the one road, bang, like a mile walk straight down, bars everywhere, ground at the end. It's a very clever bit of redesign. So that's a good one.
Absolutely. I actually remember being in Bilbao when they were rebuilding that, and I couldn't get a ticket for a game because one of the ends was just not there. They just obviously demolished one end. It was still rebuilding it. So I had to watch the game in one of those bars that you mentioned, Ian. And it's really annoying when a goal goes in and the TV is just like, it's only 1 second behind, 2 seconds behind, but you hear the cheer. You're like, oh, okay, I know what's coming. But yeah, what a city. I mean, we may actually come on to where we might want to take Newport on a pre-season tour. Come on to that in a little bit. That was another thing we got daydreaming about when we were planning this episode.
Yeah, I was going to say about St James's Park is one that I've been to. I just love that it's from the station. It feels, I think it might be entirely uphill all the walk there, and it just, especially when you're in the away end, because it's really steep as a stadium. So you just feel like you're perched on the very pinnacle of a hill, looking down at this pitch. And St James's Park is quite a special ground, I think, to have gone to. Yeah, so that'd be my one.
I scribbled down a couple of grounds that I really like. And one of them has already been mentioned, actually, which is Edgar Street at Hereford, which I think of the kind of traditional old, smaller grounds has a lot going for it. And specifically that very tight double-decker stand on Edgar Street itself with the narrow terrace down at pitch level and then the upper tier with like 6 rows of seating in it. I think that's a really great stand to watch football from. And I quite like any stand that's got seats above a terrace, because it's no coincidence that I sit at the back of the Hazel's stand, but I get to have all the benefits of the atmosphere happening down in front of me, but I still get to kind of sit down because I'm an old man now. So that's on my list. The second one that I really like is Hillsborough, which surely is the biggest and best of the traditional kind of big lower league grounds, probably the best one left in the country. It's a rarity because it manages to combine that sense of tradition and authenticity, but also with the scale of being, massive, and there's still, a few creature comforts around it as well. And the other ground I put down is the Old Manor Ground at Oxford, which is the first place where I watch live football, and has to be the worst ground to have hosted top flight football in my lifetime. But it was a formative ground for me, and also it's actually the ground of which Rodney Parade reminds me the most in a weird way. I think all we need at Rodney Parade is a proper covered terrace behind one of the goals and we'll be in business. But specifically, the thing I really loved about the Manor was the 7-foot slope between one end of the pitch and the other, and the huge advantage you had if you were kicking down the hill in the second half. And I think more grounds should have that as a feature, because it means there's real jeopardy to winning the toss or not.
Yeah, it's a bit like a cricket match, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just making the most of home conditions.
Just to come back on Edgar Street, Ed, I mean, none of you guys will have been around, obviously, when we used to play them regularly, and it was a proper derby, that, and going away there, my word, that used to be fairly lively when we played Hereford.
When we played them in the conference, was it in the promotion season? Might have been the one before, but I remember there being a goal fest midweek game and it being a bit kind of hairy. So I think that that tradition is still there. The only thing that stopped that tradition remaining is them being in like Conference North. Whenever I get asked by opposition fans about who our rivals are, I'm like, well, we don't really have any, but if Hereford ever make it back into the Football League, I feel like that's the most viable one that we've got.
Certainly the most tasty looking fixture, isn't it? Yeah, I remember those fixtures. I remember the return at Rodney Parade as well. That was quite something as well. I think Robbie Wilmot scored an absolute screamer. I feel like all of the grounds that we've mentioned, like they all sort of share that compact nature. They share that, like saying, you feel like you're right on top of the ground at St James's Park, and those stands that we're saying, you feel super close to it. So it's not like the days of Spitty where Rhys can be running up and down the running track.
Sorry, just on Spitty, because I was thinking about this, like what, because you said what are the things that we love about Rodney Parade or that we love about Somerton Park in Ian's case, or Spitty. And I was thinking about it, I thought there really wasn't a lot to love about Spitty. I mean, it was what it was. The main advantage it had was that it was within the city of Newport. But as a ground, it was, you're miles from the pitch. There was nothing within walking distance of the ground that was of any kind of interest. It was impossible to get to without a car. All the things we've talked about in terms of why you want a ground in the city centre. But the other thing I did think about Spitty that actually was good and that used to provide me with a lot of amusement was the lack of segregation between home fans and away fans, partly because I enjoy chatting with fans of other clubs, but also because it was funny to watch groups of teenage wannabe hooligans squaring up to each other with only like one bored steward standing in their way. So they'd all be there giving it the big one, going, come on then, come on, you want some, do you? Come on. And you think, well, there's nothing stopping you from just going and having a scrap. Oh, except for the fact that you're like 13 and your strength doesn't match your bravado. So like that used to be a highlight of games at Spitty.
Yeah, that's the problem when they're not being held back by
Yeah.
stewards. Then there's like, what do we do now? Like, was that right? Where the away fans would then sort of like wander around to the other end, other end of the goal.
Talking of moving between goals, which I quite like that. So when we were in non-league, you just follow the game around. We used to do that at Somerton Park. So at Somerton Park, the grandstand. I'm using that word in its loosest terms.
He's doing air quotes.
The place where there was some seats, right, was only like it was like quarter or a third. There was the halfway line, and it went a little bit either side of that. And then either side of that was the main terraced areas, one of which between the Cromwell end was open, and the one towards the railway end was covered. And you could walk behind the stand. So if we were kicking towards the Cromwell end, everybody would be on the popular bank, right, or in the Cromwell if that's where you wanted to go. And then if we were kicking towards the railway end, everyone on the popular bank, or a good chunk of those, would then walk behind the stand at half time and cram into the other stand, the other big terrace that was covered next to the stand. And I used to love that. I used to love that idea. You could always get on the side. So you weren't behind the goals, but you could follow which way you were kicking. And then, of course, if it was raining, you'd either go in the Cromwell if he was kicking that way, or you go in a bit by the railway end because it was covered. So I used to really enjoy that. And there's not many league grounds, I don't think, where you can do that, where you can sort of swap around. So we could do that. I used to love it.
I was just trying to think some of the sort of the unusual, weird things that that we love about going to a game that you don't quite get in the more polished Premier League grounds. I think, Ed, you were talking a few weeks ago on another pod episode about biased announcers. I can't remember which ground it was now, which match it was, but the biased announcers are just clearly just not even bothering to read out like the away team's lineup or something.
Which is one quite statement answer, but I do remember a couple of seasons ago when we played at Scunthorpe and we got a penalty, and Mickey was going to take the penalty, and they started blasting like white noise over the tannoy, which I thought was that deliberate housery, right? Or was so it was just really weird. I was like, that's cheeky, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You could pretend it was like a sort of some sort of electronic mistake, but I don't know about that. It was very coincidental. This noise, did he go all? He did tuck it away nicely. Yeah.
I think part of what I love about Rodney Parade as well, and I'll have a moan about it if it's like a big cup game or something, but that sort of bit behind the hazel is incredibly narrow on a busy day. You can never get food or drink if you're like the Spurs game or something. But other than that, I just love how old school it is. You've got the breeze blocks, you've got I love it. And then all the smells coming together. You got the smells of the food or the Bovril or
food, Bovril, urine from the gent.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, but that's part of it. It just takes you right into that experience. So much character. And I know it's like only been our home for about a decade now, but it just feels like there's just I never went to watch the Dragons. I'm not really a rugby guy, but it just feels like our sort of the characteristics feel like our home, and that's what I love about it. Maybe we should talk about what we like about, and I'm going to lean heavily on probably the most travelled away supporter out of the group of us, talking about some of the best bits of other grounds that we like. Initially, I had this idea of maybe we can build like a Frankenstein's version of a ideal football stadium for us based on the favourite bits from other grounds. But I think it's just a little bit easier and less stressful for us to just pull in like some of like the favoured stands, favours grounds. Ian, you always talk so passionately about some of the best grounds you've been. You went to Notts County last month, and I remember you just talking so vividly about that ground. Is that probably one that sticks in your mind?
It is a great ground, but it's a sort of it's a classic ground, I guess. If you for the sort of I don't like grounds that are sort of oval bowls where they just so I like the sort of more traditional 4 stands. So you can do them in different ways, but I think don't have it as a uniform thing. So even like Spurs' new ground, which I think is possibly the best ground in Britain at the moment, they've built a new ground, but it's not completely uniform. They've got that massive South Bank end that doesn't wrap quite into the other stands. So you've got a little bit of difference architecturally wise. But that's what I like. But Notts is a great classic ground in terms of the 4 sides. The home end being big. I like a big cop end. The other end of that is a sort of shallower end, but it's got sort of boxes on top of it. Back in the day, that used to be an open away terrace when I froze to death on it. It's just a really nice ground. I mean, Bradford's ground is brilliant at our level. That's different as well, and it's a bit quirky, and it's absolutely, Rhys was talking about Newcastle being high. The away end isn't high, but my word, the home sort of 3/4 is completely vertiginous. It's like really vertical. That's an amazing ground. But there's some really quirky little ones. I'm going to probably give Grimsby too many shout outs. My mate Steve's going to love this, but Grimsby's ground's fabulous. The Findus stand they've got is great. I sat in with the home fans last year because I went with Steve, went in their old grandstand, which dates from whenever, and you can feel it. It's like properly, it's still like wooden and incredible. But in the away end there, they've got a bar in the away end, which is like your nan's living room. It's got like a sofa in it, and like it's the weirdest, quirkiest little thing I've ever sort of come across as an away end. Goodness only knows how they get on when they've got a big away following, because you can get about 10 people in there. So it's really, really quirky. But there are a couple that spring to mind straight away. But there's some really great grounds. I mean, going back in the day, it was Darlington's old ground at Feetham's, because you had to walk. There was a cricket ground in front of it. So you had to sort of walk, like home fans went one side and away fans went the other side. And that was a really interesting old, ground. And then, of course, we had the Reynolds Arena, which was an absolute monstrosity. But
Their new ground is quite nice. I played rugby for Darlington many moons ago. I lived around the corner from the Feetham's Arena, the Reynolds Arena.
The Hubris Dome, yeah.
Yeah, which didn't really host much when I lived there, but they moved to Darlington RFC's ground, and that's a lovely little ground. I think they've spent quite a bit of money on it now.
not done that once. I just want to put on the list.
Ian, you mentioned that bar in the Grimsby away end, and it brought me to one of the grounds that I really love going to. It's actually in your neck of the woods. It's Ellen Road at Leeds. I like it. It's a classical ground. It is surprisingly compact as well. It is a properly classical ground. But in the away end, they do have, again, it feels like a pub that shouldn't be in the middle of a way. It should be a concourse, but no, I'm pretty sure it's carpeted as well. But it was just such an odd thing to see. It felt like basically not quite a Weatherspoons, but an old man pub basically has just been sort of plonked in the middle of the away end at Ellen Road, and I can never get that out of my head. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a great ground, to be fair. I go past it every day. I could almost walk to Ellen Road at a push for a game. Yeah, I mean, it is I've been there quite a lot. Living here, it is an amazing ground, to be fair. The problem with Ellen Road is there's nothing around it really. It's traditionally where it's always been. It's not moved there, but it is not in the city centre or particularly near the city centre. And as a result of that, it just doesn't have any infrastructure around it. So there's no pubs around. Well, I mean, there's the Peacock, which is the famous Leeds pub, and so there isn't the pubs near the ground.
Any more in terms of grounds we love going to?
I'll pick out 2, both in the northwest. So Goodison Park, Everton. Obviously, they're only there for another. I think this may even be the last season. I was delighted to go there. Back end of last season to watch Everton women against Liverpool women.
Saw Newport play there. That was a night.
Well, that was the dream. I kept waiting for us to draw them in the cup, but it wasn't going to happen. So I thought, fine, I'll find another game to go to up there. But to tick that off the list, I mean, it's such a evocative ground to walk around, and football will be poorer when they leave there. So that was great. The other one that always makes me laugh is Prenton Park, Birkenhead, Tranmere Rovers, just because 3 sides of it are just a kind of bog standard normal lowly ground, and then you have that enormous oversized cop behind the one end that is just beyond too big for what they are. I love it because I don't understand how that got built. It's insanely big. If you've not seen it, look it up. It's massive.
Reminds me of Woking's ground for the same reason.
Yeah, same thing.
Just random massive stand, but they don't have any stands around. It's all terraced around the other three sides, so it's just wild. I love that. That's what I mean. I love those idiosyncrasies about those type of grounds.
Just on the point you were making about slagging off out of town grounds, because I think we should dwell on it for a second. The thing that makes Rodney Parade, I love Rodney Parade as a ground. I think as a ground it's fantastic. But even if the ground was rubbish, we should remember just how lucky we are to play in a ground that allows you to have a really easy day at the football. I like to structure my Saturday around a lot of things that have nothing to do with football, and then spend like the bare minimum time at the ground, but to do the other stuff around it. And that's where Rodney Parade, I think, is really good. And away fans make this point as well. It's really easy to get to by public transport. You've got loads of good quality pubs within easy striking distance, and quite a lot of not so great ones as well. But there's.
Did you just still use the word good quality pub and Newport in a sense? Clearly changed since I left.
Well, firstly, Ian, I'm going to stand up for our good sponsors at the Riverside.
Obviously.
As we know, I'm also a huge fan of the Murringer. I always think like the mark of a good pub is one where you can go in and sit down quietly and read a book on your own with a pint and know that there'll be at least one other person doing exactly the same. And by that measurement, the Murringer is a fantastic pub. But also the indoor market, and I know I'm going to make myself unpopular with all the boomers who populate the pictures and memories of Newport group on Facebook who go on about how much better it was in the old days. But it's great now. There's dozens of...
It's so good, right?
It's so good. Dozens of different types of cuisine from all around the world in beautiful Victorian splendour, a stone's throw from the ground. It's packed on a match day. Away fans can't believe we've got this gem right by our ground. And then, you've also got Le Pub, and we talked on the pod recently about, grassroots music venues and how great they are. So you've got Le Pub, smashing venue run by good people. There's always a band on after a game on a Saturday if you've got time to kill. And you've got all this stuff within a 5-minute walk of Rodney Parade, and you just think, why on earth would we want to build a ground of our own on an industrial estate by the ring road when we've got what we have now? I think it's fabulous, and we take it for granted a little bit. There is a reason why our crowds have quadrupled in the last 20 years, and it's in no small measure because of that.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. But for me, it's like I love just dragging non-Newport County supporting mates to watch a game. Yeah, almost forcing them to go against their will. But then they enjoy themselves anyway and they have a great time. But it's also, these days, you're sort of working, all the time, and you're getting a bit older, so you're not sort of seeing your mates every week like you might have done in your 20s or university or whatever. So it's also just a nice time to catch up with people. It's just a nice time to, you might not have seen them in a month or two. Be like, hey, let's go to this game. You free? Yeah, I'm free. Right, I'll get tickets. And then you meet up, and then you have a whole day where you're either traveling halfway across the country, or you're just traveling to Newport, or you're just going down the road or whatever. But you're still spending hours and hours with this person who might be busy with a family of their own or whatever. And it's just nice to have that as sort of a catch up time, as an excuse to catch up. And as you say, the football almost becomes incidental.
Can I have a little chat about food? Because I think one of the things, I came into this chat we were doing today with a slight different. I was thinking I was going to be designing my perfect ground. So I had my architect lined up, what it was going to look like, all this sort of stuff. I'm not have to say that's something else. But one of the things for me is, most football grounds, some of them are getting better at this, but most are really bad at food. And there's some great places where you can get a good pie or you can get or whatever, but so many grounds are really bad at it. And if I had the opportunity to sort of, whether that's for us Rodney Parade, but the opportunity to get good food in there, good food casts, local people doing local produce, why aren't we serving local beers rather than just having all the normal corporate conglomerates? You go to some places, particularly their little bits outside, their little fan zones you were saying. Grimsby, their little fan zone, they've got Doc's Beers. So that's the local Grimsby brewery. They don't do the beers in the ground, which is interesting, but they do the sort of fan zone bit outside. And there's a really, we've got Tiny Rebel as a brewery, as a Newport brewer, but there'll be others that every people will mention. So we've got I'm sure there's lots of breweries and microbreweries around South Wales and Gwent, or if we're going to market the whole Gwent thing. why aren't we promoting those and giving like that? If we're going to be this club of the community, you want to be giving other opportunities to businesses, don't you? Food carts, brewers. Let's have some of that going on, because I think we miss a trick there massively. We just go for this sort of bland, and we're not the only ones who do this bland corporate, lowest common denominator stuff, and it's not very good and it's overpriced. We can do better than that.
Just going back to your original point, Ian, about the food being so bad, I want to know what's on your dream match day menu. I want to hear what would you
Well-
love to see at a football ground? Come on.
Well, before I get onto that, I want to tell you about the best food experience I've seen at a football ground. This might not make the cut, but so we can't take anything into a British ground, can we? Right? You can't take in a tea bag, right? But certain countries you could take stuff in, right? So, and Spain particularly, I've been to quite a few games in Spain. People take in their own sort of rolls and all sorts of stuff like that. And I was sat with my partner watching Deportivo Jerez. So Jerez is sherry in Spanish. So all the sherry comes from Jerez. Great place to go, right? If you want food, drink, and football, Jerez, great, right? They play in like a 25,000 seat stadium, but in about the Spanish 4th division. So there's no one there. So it's hilarious. And I was there, and I was half time. I went to get a beer and came back. A bloke in front of me had what I thought was a sandwich, a long sort of, roll thing. I started unwrapping this tin foil, right? And he had all of the legs of a spider crab, right? So he had spider crab he pours lemon in, and he starts eating and shelling this crab in the ground. I've never seen anything like that wherever I've been. So that was pretty astonishing.
It's not quite as impressive, but I think one of the last times that I went to the old Kingsmeadow ground before Wimbledon moved to where they are now, with AFC Wimbledon Rob, who's been on the pod before, and I was stood with him in the home end, and this is what a like middle class club AFC Wimbledon are. That Rob got out of his backpack. He'd made some homemade calzone, and he brought some seasoning, and this like no one even gave it a second glance. People barely looked up from their Guardian.
Brilliant. Well, you said to me what would be my favourite food, right? So I was one of my best match day experiences ever. I'm sorry, I'm back in Spain again. Was going to see Real Sociedad. So that's in San Sebastian, which is arguably the food capital of Europe. But what the Basques do better than is they've invented it, is pinchos. So the little sticks, a little bit of food on it. Get up near the ground, pinchos bars everywhere. So that what's brilliant about that. I like watching, I'm all for a bit of, cold weather, but watching a game in Spain, in a t-shirt with a bit of heat, wander up to the ground, nice cold glass of, white wine in my case up there, and just going in the bar and having different bits of pinchos. That's absolutely fabulous. You'd have a bit of cheese here. You can have a bit of, if you like your seafood, there's loads of that, charcuterie, whatever you want, on a bit of bread with a glass of wine, wander around. It's a fabulous way to eat. And there's a great quirk at that ground as well, right? Because it's near the Bay of Biscay. So they have a situation there they have the Rocket Man. So because they got the fishermen who are out fishing while games are on, when, I don't know which way this round it goes, but when there's a goal scored, the Rocket Man runs out of the ground and sets off a rocket. So the fishermen in the Bay of Biscay can tell that there's been a goal, right? So I'm assuming it's one goal maybe for the opposition. And if Real Sociedad score, he goes out and lets off 2 rockets. So that the fishermen out in the Bay of Biscay can track the score by the rockets being fired outside the ground. So that's quite cool.
I think we need that in Newport, don't we?
Be great, wouldn't it? But
The great sort of meats and cheese and seafood on a stick. I mean, it sounds great in San Sebastian, but in provincial towns across England or Wales, I don't think like a fish finger and a bit of cheddar is quite going to do the same thing, is it? So,
I mean, pie is one of the greatest inventions ever from a food thing, right? That's why they're in grounds, aren't they? But you can get some really, really, really appallingly rank pies, and you can get some absolutely amazing pies. And when you get a good pie, nothing beats that for me.
Right. Any more on grounds, food, music? Oh yeah, music. Oh, good.
As I'm wearing my skin.
No, it's fine.
No, I've not been back to the parade for a while, and I've heard that they've upped the game on that front. But I think Salford are a terrible club in every shape, way, and form, and they shouldn't exist.
Don't hold back.
Right? They shouldn't exist, right? However, they play Manchester-based music when you're there, right? And to be fair to Wimbledon, which is sponsored by Cherry Red and it's the Cherry Red ground, they play music, particularly at halftime, off Cherry Red records, right? So you've got a slot. You might get a Dead Kennedys at halftime. I mean, that's really cool for me. But I really think that grounds should plug into their local culture, and there's so much stuff that we could play that is Newport-based, Gwent-based, Welsh-based, links to Newport. There's a lot we could do there, and I'd like to see us, do a little bit more of that.
We have been leaning into it, I think, a bit more. The music it's definitely gone up a few notches in the last couple of seasons. I will stand up for the pre-match Rodney Parade music because I think we've got a whole lot better than we used to be.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've not experienced it yet, so I'll look forward to. I was looking forward to it on the 2nd of January, but as you know, I'll be on the train back before the game kicked off. So the other thing about that is talking about PAs and stuff like that, which we were touching on earlier. One of my modern football's rubbish things is shut up on the PAs.
Yeah.
Just shouting constantly, blithering rubbish about Tracy's 4th birthday or whatever it is, right? Not interested. Just we crank the volumes up so much, I can't do me records when I'm away on an away ground.
The sweet spot is loud enough that people can hear it if they want to, but not so loud that they can't have a conversation above it.
PAs now are good, but what I always remember from like when I went to matches when I was a kid is just they were awful, completely unintelligible.
Two things I'd taken from that conversation. One, we need to campaign for Ian to have a takeover of the pre-match music.
What you don't know, and none of you know, is that many, many, many years ago, I used to DJ an indie night.
That's not surprised me one iota. Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to think. Like, maybe we need an offshoot 92XL's music podcast. Because what people don't know, the WhatsApp group is mostly chat about the games and Newport sort of trails, but it's also just full of gigs. If demand exists at all, we may put out a music based episode. Okay, so we're going to round off here. We've talked about our favorite match day experience, but the weather's been miserable. So we want to conjure up a money no object, a dream pre-season tour for Newport County, where we'd love to go on tour with Newport. And obviously the football, we want to play against some decent opposition. We want to test ourselves. But more than that, we want to talk about, we've mentioned food, we mentioned culture already. We want to talk about the footballing heritage of these kind of places as well. So who should I look at first?
So I've got 2 tours. Unsurprisingly, we're going to Spain for one of them, but the second one might surprise you. So we're going to do a tour. We're going to get battered in every game, but we're going to have the greatest time doing it, right? So we're going to do a tour right across the northern tip and round the corner. So we're going to cover the Basque Country, Asturias, and Galicia, right? So we're going to start in San Sebastian. We're going to play Real Sociedad, and we're going to do the Pinchos and all of that stuff, and the Rockets and all of that. We're going to do that. Then we'll bob down the coast, and as we go in, we'll take an Ebor's ground, which is a little ground, on the way to Bilbao, obviously, and we'll do the whole Bilbao thing, which will be amazing. And we go to the Guggenheim and, incredible stuff. They've also got a transporter bridge. We can do all of that sort of cultural link malarkey. Then we're going to keep going down to play sport in Gijón, however you pronounce that. Then we're going to go down and we're going to play Racing Santander. And we're going to keep going and we're going to play Deportivo La Coruña. And we're going to go around the corner and we're going to finish Vigo, where I went last year. And we're going to go to Celta Vigo. So we're going to have, we're going to see some amazing stadiums, incredible culture, beautiful, food and wine and beer. Absolutely, it'll be the tour of a lifetime. We wouldn't score a goal and we wouldn't win a game, but my word, we would have an absolutely amazing time. So that's my ideal tour, right? Do you want to come in
before
there,
you
Jim?
go to the next one?
Yeah.
I just want to say, I mean, you're both a glutton for punishment for these games that you're setting us up, but also a glutton for gluttony because I mean the food sounds incredible. So
Yeah. So my second one is completely different to that, both culturally, food-wise, and everything. So it's a juxtaposition to that. And we're going to go to Scotland. This is a little bit of a shout out to Stu, who, as you know, comes on the pod regularly, friend of the pod, who's a Morton fan. but their grounds, because we're also talking about grounds, so I might get the pronunciation wrong here, and please apologise. I think it's Capello Park, which is supposed to be a very iconic ground, and it's got amazing floodlights, and you could look out and see the shipbuilding cranes of the Clyde. So we're gonna go play Morton, then we're gonna wander over into Glasgow, and we're gonna play like Partick Thistle, because all those Partick fans turned up at Carlisle that year I was there. We'll go and play them, right? Then we'll go and play Queen's Park, because they play at Hampden, don't they, if memory serves well. So we can go and play at Hampden Park. That'd be quite cool, wouldn't it, against an amateur side? I think then we can go over and have a proper game over in Edinburgh against like Ibs or something. And then we'll end up just over the border in Berwick. We'll play Berwick Rangers, which is an English club, even though they play in Scotland. So we have that like a little border rivalry going on there. So that's my alternative. It would still be interesting culturally wise. We can have square sausages, we can have deep fried things, potato scones, lots of interesting culinary stuff up in Scotland as well. So that's my second option. Bit cheaper, but still good fun.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, I know, Ian, you talked about San Sebastian being the food capital of Europe, but for me, I'm pretty sure a League Two team, maybe Gillingham, I might be wrong, has kind of done this preseason tour already. And when I saw them out there in July a few years ago, I was insanely jealous. And that is getting onto Lake Como, getting onto the Italian lakes, because
Great.
my goodness, what a setting for football. And Como FC, it's a bit annoying because they're in Serie A now. They've done quite well. I think Ozan Roberts was involved there as well, I think, as well as Cesc Fabregas. I think Dennis Wise was involved. I may be getting this confused, but I'm pretty sure he was involved there for some reason. But they're now in Serie A, so they're more known as a well-known footballing away trip for British people to get excited about. But man, that ground on the shores of Lake Como itself, in the town of Como, is just stunning. What a backdrop! And there are plenty of other teams around there. Got Atalanta in Bergamo, and we've got Brescia is not far away as well. But really, it's not about the teams for me. It is about sitting on the shore of Lake Como with some fresh pasta, an Italian red, and just watching the sun set over the ripple of the waters on the lake. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and the fact that there's a football stadium just there waiting for us to go and visit, I think we need to go. That's for me. Who fancies going next? Rhys, have you got anywhere in mind you'd love to take Newport?
Well, I haven't got as many strong opinions as everyone else, I don't think, but I'd really like to do Lisbon. I just absolutely love it as a city. It's got all those hills as well for the fitness element of the players to build on their fitness, and the football culture around Portugal is absolutely superb as well, isn't it? Just like the way they play with that kind of level of joy and flair to their game. It's fantastic, and the food's not bad either. So, it's still got that going for it. And obviously, Nelson's speaks the lingo, doesn't he? So I'm sure he's got plenty of contacts around Portuguese football from his wealth of experience, as we found out in his interview. So I just think we probably have both fans and players culture would have a fantastic time getting involved in Lisbon.
Let's develop that thought a bit further, because I can't believe no one's made this suggestion. I mean, obviously, Flinney used to make us have pre-season friendlies against Dundee. Coco made us have that pre-season game up at Sheffield FC. I mean, surely next year Nelson's going to get us out to Madeira, right? And
They're friendly against Maritimo.
yeah, Ian can get his £600 bottle of Madeira wine. We can all check out the Cristiano Ronaldo Museum, then get our county towels on the sun lounges by the beach. Happy days. Is that not what we're all expecting? Come on, Mr. Jenkins. Come on, Nelson, make it happen.
I'm all.
Oh, can you imagine? Can you imagine?
The Bridges family holiday will get cancelled next summer if that's on the cards. So that was one I'd scribbled down, but I thought someone else would go for. The other one that is perhaps a more realistic suggestion, or it's not an exciting one, but I think it's a good one, is Morton in Marsh. Because the last time that we played up at Morton in Marsh was back in 2019, when a County 11, which was basically an academy team, played Morton Rangers to mark the 30th anniversary of County's first campaign playing at Morton's ground. Now, I didn't go that day, and actually I've never been to their ground, but I'd really like to. And I do think that maybe we should do more to commemorate that chapter from the club's history, give a little back to Moreton Rangers for the fact that all those years ago they gave us somewhere to play when no one else would. And, plus also a look at Wikipedia and Google tells me it's a very pretty part of the world. There are plenty of nice countryside walks around, some good spots for camping, and it's within striking distance of a 300-year-old inn that is now run by ex-professional footballer Jim Steele, who was in the Southampton team that beat Man United in the 1976 Cup final. So I'm advocating for a pre-season tour of the Cotswolds, culminating in a match at Moreton Rangers, so we can check out what sounds like a good pub, and a new generation of county fans can build a bond with a team with whose history ours is intertwined.
That is a brilliant shout. I did see us at Moreton when we reformed, but the fact that we always put some money in Undies coffees, I don't have an issue with us putting some money in Undies coffers. But why haven't we said a thank you to Moreton like that? I think we should do. I think we should recognise our history, and I think we should say thank you. And I think we should go there as a league club, because when we set up at Moreton, our ambition, we set that up to be football of the future, to get back in the Football League, and now we've got back in the Football League and have been for a while. We should go and play there. It's a great shout.
I mean, like I say, we did send an 11 to have a game there, and we've been there periodically, but it's been a little while, and I think, you could do a nice little pre-season tour of the Cotswolds. That would be, there are worse places to spend a few days in the summer holidays.
We can manage that. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for that. We're making a stream in the cold, dark winter months. I will wrap up now. In the outro, Ed, you've got to explain whatever our release schedule is over Christmas. What is our release schedule over Christmas?
I don't know what our release schedule is over Christmas. We'll put this out around Christmas Eve or thereabouts, and we'll do something when we get chance. I mean, there are games and people are after them, but it's just whether we get time to pull an episode together, and whether I want to spend my Christmas period editing stuff or watching World's Strongest Man and eating my body weight in Quality Street. So,
okay, well, that is about all we've got time for on this episode, this Christmas special of the 1912 Exiles podcast. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who has supported us this year, whether that's through Ko-Fi or otherwise. It's been great building this little community of Newport followers and having all the extra voices on this season. And so long may that continue. It's just been a fab year for 1912 Exiles, and we've loved it. So all that remains is for me to say thank you very much to Ed, Rhys and Ian for joining me this evening. And I want to say thanks to Rhys for this one, because we were thinking about Christmas-based puns, and Rhys immediately just came out with Cameron, and we wish you a Merry Christmas. So look after yourselves, look after each other, and above all, as always, keep it counting.